l'audiovisuel privé. Ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que ce sont les mêmes qui sont aussi propriétaires de grandes entreprises qui ont des relations très étroites avec l'État. Qu'il s'agisse de Lagardère, qui est aussi un marchand d'armes, et qu'il s'agisse de Bouygues, qui aujourd'hui est présent dans le nucléaire. Donc tout ça est quand même très inquiétant quant au pluralisme, quant au conflit d'intérêts, et donc quant à la démocratie.
Je pense que c'est révélateur, oui, d'un climat qui est quand même de plus en plus inquiétant pour les journalistes, pour le secret des sources surtout et pour la liberté de la presse en France, puisque ces dernières années, on a vu beaucoup de convocations, de perquisitions, de journalistes placés en garde à vue aussi. On a l'impression que ça s'accélère et c'est étonnant puisque le président avait, au moment de son élection, un petit peu avant, rappelé son attachement au secret des sources.
La France détient aujourd'hui le triste record en Europe du nombre de perquisitions dans les rédactions et du nombre de journalistes mis en examen ou placés en garde à vue. La France fait moins bien aujourd'hui que les nouveaux entrants dans l'Union européenne, des pays comme la Pologne, la Bulgarie, la Roumanie, où il y a encore pas longtemps, des journalistes pouvaient se faire casser la gueule au coin d'une rue parce qu'ils avaient enquêté sur une affaire sensible.
Historically, the control and manipulation of political opinion has been the Freemasons' main weapon in gaining control of countries and states. Once in control of the rulers and politicians of a country, laws and political structures could be changed in accordance with their agenda. However, since restricting the body does not necessarily mean restricting the mind, the Freemason recognizes that their plan for a global government hinges completely on subduing the masses to their agenda, and thus eliminating opposition to their cause. And the greatest threat to their plan, posing more danger than any army or law, is the threat of a free-thinking mind. In order to eliminate this threat and to achieve their objective, the Masons have set about the boldest plan ever devised: the complete control of every aspect of human life, your life. And the weapons they are using against you are in your very homes, entertaining you and your children, and gradually indoctrinating you without you even realizing. In today's society, people are spending more and more time engaged with modern media. Television, cinema, computer games, the internet, popular fiction and popular music are an integral part of our lives. Yet these provide a vast expanse on information, which you are taking either consciously or subconsciously into your mind. Information on society ranging from ideals and morals and the difference between right and wrong to the way societies and economies should be structured is passed before you every single day. These media play a significant role in providing the basis for determining an individual's view of the world and everything that exists. Thus, any one group in complete control of this information placed on these media will in effect have the power to indoctrinate practically the entire populace of the world to their way of thinking. And it is this fact that Freemasons are exploiting. The Masons are using the entertainment industry in particular to condition people to their way of thinking, either openly or subliminally. The methods they use vary, but the goal is the same: to impose their beliefs, their ideology and their objectives on you in such a way that you begin to think of them as your own.
And this is the structure that they're moving towards. Why? Because when you're the few and you want to control the many, you have to centralize decision-making. The more diversity of decision-making there is, the less control any central point is going to have over it. So what you need to do is constantly centralize power so control over more and more and more people goes into fewer and fewer hands. We started with a tribal situation a long time ago. The people in the tribe decided what was going to happen. We then brought, as part of this centralization, it's gone over at this whole period I'm talking about, the tribes came together into what we call nations. And now, a few people at the center of the nation are dictating to all the former tribes that make up that nation. We're now well into the next stage of that, which is bringing nations together under unions like the European Union, so a few people at the center are now dictating to all those nations which are made up of all those tribes before. And the next stage of that, which they're already preparing for, is to take us into a world government that would dictate to these unions that are building up, like the European Union, the American Union that they want via the North American Union, the Pacific Union, evolved out of organizations like APEC, Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, and the African Union, already in place, evolved out of the Organization of African Unity and other bodies. And what they done in many of these unions is start them off as free trade zones, just for jobs, that's all it is, no worries. And then they've turned them into fully fledged dictatorships, which is what happened in the European Union. And the reason is that you've got to centralize power if you want to get more and more control in the hands of the few over more and more people. How do they manipulate this? One of the coordinates, one of the methods of manipulation, a massively important one to understand, is one I've dubbed Problem-Reaction-Solution, where you want to change society in a way that if you do it openly, you'll get resistance, massive resistance from the population. So what you do is you create a problem covertly, you blame someone or something else for it, you pass that fake version of the event through the unquestioning, pathetic mainstream media to the people, unquestioned overwhelmingly and certainly uninvestigated, and you want the people to react to the manufactured problem with outrage, with fear, and you want them to say, do something. What are they going to do about it? At which point you then offer solutions openly with changes in legislation and society and its structure to advance your agenda. And because of the problem-reaction-solution, you do not get the resistance here that you would have got without the manufactured problem. 9/11 is a bloody classic. Another way of describing this is ordo ab chaos, the Latin motto of the 33rd degree of Scottish Rite of Freemasonry: order out of chaos, problem, reaction, solution. Create the chaos, then offer the order, your change out of that chaos. So like I say, 9/11 was a wonderful, classic, most blatant example of it. You want to change society, so you create a massive problem. As a result of that problem, you offer the solution, all there, written and ready, the Patriot Act in America and around the world, their versions of it, to change society and to launch a war on terror and an invasion of countries like Afghanistan and, by implication, Iraq. This is Zbigniew Brzezinski, President Jimmy Carter's national security advisor and a major mentor going back to the 1980s of Barack Obama. This is what he said in 1997 in his book. Moreover, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus on foreign policy issues, except in the circumstances of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat. Therefore, we create one, 9/11, and bingo, we then introduce what we say must happen to stop the terrorists. In other words, we change society and advance our agenda, the Orwellian state and all the rest of it. These buildings were brought down because they were made to come down. And similar buildings around the world that burnt for longer and were much more fierce never came down. And these are the only buildings of their kind who've ever come down because allegedly of fire. The official story of 9/11 has just left the room. And I've gone into that in great detail before. I'm just using it as an example of problem-reaction-solution. But when through the web you control the intelligence agencies, you control the governments, you control the media, you control countries, and you control the manipulation of fake terrorists like Osama bin Laden, then you've got all the pieces you need to orchestrate the problem-reaction-solution and to then use this to change society in the image that you have desired. And this is a classic. Adolf Hitler proposing the creation of the Gestapo in Nazi Germany. An evil exists that threatens every man, woman and child of this great nation. We must take steps to ensure our domestic security and protect our homeland. Or actually, word for word, what was said after 9/11. The Second World War, problem, reaction, solution. This is why it is no paradox, no coincidence or contradiction that the same people can be shown to have funded the Nazis, that funded the Americans, and funded the British, overwhelmingly based around the cartel of the Rothschilds. They created Nazi fascism, they created Soviet communism and the capitalist world. They brought them together in conflict, the second conflict in a very short time, and afterwards the world was exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally. Something must be done. This can't go on. What are they going to do about it? Ah, gotcha. Because of all this conflict, all this war, it's terrible. Terrible. What we're going to do is we're going to centralize power with the United Nations European Union, which was justified in many ways by let's stop European countries fighting among themselves because we'll trade. Well, they stopped fighting among themselves because they stopped orchestrating it. That's why the Bretton Woods Agreement with the World Bank and all that stuff all came in as a result of the Second World War. Then there's another version, which I now call no problem reaction solution. This is when you don't need a real problem, you just need the public perception of a problem, i.e. weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, i.e. human-caused climate change. And then you can offer a solution to a problem that doesn't actually exist, but if enough people think it does, well, you got them. Totalitarian tiptoe, as I call it, goes in conjunction with problem, reaction, solution. This is real simple. You start at A, you know you're going to Z, but you know if you go in a big leap, the change is going to be so big and so quick that people are going to go, what's happening, what's happening? Turn that television show off, what's happening? And so you go in steps, as big as you can get away with, but not so big that you get too much of a reaction. And as this quite rightly said, you really think it would be this obvious. Well, it's becoming that obvious now as we move along, but up to this point it hasn't been, unless you looked for it. The European Union was turned from a free trade zone, nothing to worry about, just for jobs, into what it is now, a centralized dictatorship, through the totalitarian tiptoe. And here is the founding father of the EU, as they call him, Jean Monnet, a Rothschild frontman. Europe's nations should be guided towards the superstate without their people understanding what is happening. This can be accomplished by successive steps, each disguised as having an economic purpose, but which will eventually and irreversibly lead to federation. And the word fascism, which comes from this symbol, the fasci from the Roman Empire, is individuality tied together and ruled by the accent. The central point, European Union, precisely described. Globalization, which is the constant centralization of power, which is more and more power in the hands of fewer and fewer over more and more people. This is a totalitarian tiptoe. More and more, the globalized economy is taking over, so that every country is dependent on every other country, therefore has no power of individual action.